Hello, my name is Cavill and welcome back to the Dragon's Lair. Today we are returning to Middle-earth. We are travelling to the dark depths of Moria, to the bridge of Khazad-Dûm. It is a place where I think the most important event in the entire Lord of the Rings saga takes place, and today we're going to deep dive the reasons for that. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and get yourself some snacks and something to drink. Today, we are standing on a narrow span of ancient stone, suspended over an abyss that has no bottom. We are in the heart of Moria, Khazad-Dûm, at the bridge. For a casual observer, this is a cool wizard fight. It's a high-octane climax to the Fellowship of the Ring. But if we peel back the layers of ink and imagination, we find that the bridge is something far more profound. It is a cosmic courtroom, a liturgical rite, and, for J.R.R. Tolkien, this is the moment where his fundamentally religious and Catholic work moves from the shadows into the blinding light of the secret fire. Today, we aren't just talking about a wizard and a monster. We're talking about the collision of two fires, one that creates and one that consumes. We are exploring the ontology of the abyss. In literature, we call a place like a bridge a liminal space, a threshold. It becomes a thin place where the veil between the physical world and the spiritual world become translucent. Think about the structure of Moria. It is more than a mine. It is a cathedral of the earth. The Fellowship's journey through it is catabasis, a descent into the underworld. But for Tolkien, this isn't just a physical descent. As the Fellowship moves deeper, they are travelling backward through the history of Middle-earth. They are moving away from the Age of Men and back toward the Elder Days, a time when angels and demons walked the earth in their naked power. When they reach the bridge, they have reached the edge of the world. On one side, the safety of the exit. On the other, the shadow and flame. In the logic of the story, the bridge is an altar where a sacrifice must be offered. To understand that sacrifice, we have to look at the minister standing on the span. Tolkien famously noted that The Lord of the Rings is a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. But he didn't write an allegory. He didn't make Gandalf a space Jesus. Instead, he practiced what he called subcreation. He believed that because we are made in the image of the Creator, our highest calling is to build secondary worlds that reflect the primary reality of truth. On the bridge, we see the concept of sacramentalism, the idea that physical things can be outward signs of inward grace. Gandalf's staff, his sword Glamdring, his grey cloak, these aren't just gear. They are liturgical vestments. Gandalf is isn't just a man with a magic trick. He is a minister, performing a pastoral act. He is the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep, but he is also an exorcist. He isn't just fighting a monster. He is commanding an illegal squatter of the First Age to return to the void. This is a scene of sovereign authority, not just power, and to understand how a tired old man can command a demon of shadow and flame, we have to go back to the beginning, to the gardens of Valinor. Before he was Gandalf, he was Olorin. In the hierarchy of Tolkien's cosmos, he is a Maya, an angelic being of the same order as the Balrog, but tuned to a vastly different frequency. While other Maya were drawn to the forge of the craftsman, like Sauron and Saruman, or the strength of the hunter, Olorin spent his youth in the gardens of Ermo, the master of visions, at the feet of Nienna. This is the most critical origin point for the bridge. Nienna is the Vala of sorrow and pity. She does not weep for herself. She weeps for the marring of the world, the brokenness of creation. From her, Olorin learned the most potent weapon in the war against entropy, pity. In narrative terms, This is the wise fool, or the humble sage trope. While Sauron was studying how to chain wills, Olorin was studying how to heal hearts. This means that when Gandalf finally faces the Balrog on the bridge, he isn't just fighting with a sword. He's fighting with the accumulated weight of 1,000 years of empathy. The Balrog has forgotten what pity is. It only understands the mathematics of force. Gandalf's strength comes from his connection to the marred world he has sworn to protect. But this strength was born in a moment of profound holy fear. When the Valar held their council to send messengers to Middle-earth, Manwë, the king of the gods, specifically called for Olorin. His response was shocking. "I am too weak for such a task, and I fear Sauron." In the Catholic tradition, we call this nolo episcopari. I do not wish to be a bishop. This is the sovereign paradox, the idea that the only person truly fit for power is the one terrified of it. Olorin's fear wasn't cowardice, it was humility. He knew the scale of the enemy, and he knew his own capacity to fail. Manwë's rebuttal was simple. Your fear is exactly the reason you must go. Like Moses at the burning bush, or Jonah fleeing to Tarshish, Olorin is the reluctant prophet. He didn't choose the mission chose him, because his ego was small enough to be a vessel for grace. This makes the yes at the bridge of Khazad-Dûm infinitely more powerful. The Gandalf we see standing on that narrow span is not a man who found his courage. He's a spirit who conquered his self-doubt 2,000 years ago. He is the servant who has spent 2 millennia practicing the art of humble, so that when the moment the exorcist finally arrives, there is nothing of Gandalf the ego left in the way. When the Valar, the archangels of the West, sent their messengers to Middle-earth, they didn't send them as shimmering spirits or terrifying warriors. They sent them as Istari. Tolkien was very specific. They were clothed in the bodies of men, real and not feigned. This was not a costume. This was a kenosis, a self-emptying. In theology, kenosis is the act of a divine being voluntarily laying aside their power to inhabit the limitations of the created world. For Gandalf, this meant that his body was a prison of biological necessity. He didn't just look like an old man. He was an old man. He felt the biting cold of the mountain pass in his marrow. He felt the dry, scratching thirst of the mines. He felt the heavy, thudding exhaustion of a heart that had been beating for 2,000 years. In narrative terms, we call this the power limiter trope. Gandalf is a cosmic being who has agreed to operate within the hitbox of a mortal human. He could be stabbed, he could be burnt, he could die of exposure. But the mask went deeper than the skin. It was a mental veiling. Upon incarnation, his vast memories of the Blessed Realm became like dim dreams. Gandalf didn't arrive with a blueprint for victory. He had to learn the languages, the maps, the flickering hearts of Middle-earth through raw, often painful experience. He traded all-knowing for empathy. Why would the Valar subject their greatest servant to such a handicap? Because the flesh was a moral governor. If you have the power of a god, it is easy to fix the world by force. By being trapped in a body that feels pain and weariness, the wizards were forbidden from matching Sauron's will to power with their own divine naked power. They were sent to suggest, not command. They had to learn how to love the creature by becoming one. Their job was to rekindle hearts, and you can only do that if you know what it feels like for a heart to grow cold. This is what makes the bridge so terrifying. On that narrow span, the power limiter becomes a death sentence. The Balrog has no restrictions. It is a Maya who has rejected the sacrifice of the flesh, inhabiting a hadhod, a self-wrought, monstrous shape of shadow and flame. It is an unbound ego. When they meet, it is a metaphysical mismatch. Gandalf is facing a nuclear reactor, and trying to operate it with a human battery. He's standing as a tired old man against an unbound elemental force. On the bridge, Gandalf isn't fighting just a demon. He's fighting the very hitbox of his own mortality. This is where we find the secret of his endurance. Narya, the Ring of Fire. Círdan, the shipwright, gave Gandalf this ring because he saw that the flesh would be too heavy for the spirit to bear alone. Narya didn't give Gandalf the ability to throw fireballs. It acted as a spiritual anchor. It was a battery that kept his mortal heart from stopping under the pressure of 2 millennia of labour. On the bridge, Gandalf has to bypass the safety protocols of his body. When he cries out his authority, he is channeling power that his human heart was never meant to hold. This is why he's so depleted after the shutting spell. The cables of his physical body were literally melting under the voltage of his Maya soul. When the Balrog looks at Gandalf, it sees a peasant, a weak, old man. It doesn't realize the grey is a self-imposed prison. But for Gandalf, the prison is his greatest strength, because he has felt what it is to feel small. He knows exactly what he is fighting for. On the bridge, it isn't power versus power. It is agape, sacrificial love in a body versus ego, malice in shadow. When Olorin finally arrived at the Grey Havens, he was the least impressive of the 5 wizards. Saruman was tall and commanding. The Blue Wizards were shrouded in mystery, and Gandalf appeared as nothing more than a bent old man with a staff, a traveller in rags. But Círdan the shipwright, the oldest and wisest elf in Middle-earth, possessed the grace of discernment. He didn't look at the rags, he looked at the spirit within. He recognized that while Saruman had the most power, Gandalf had the greatest spirit. In what we call a subcreative ordination, Círdan gave him Narya, the Ring of Fire. He told him, "Take this ring, master, for your labours will be heavy, but it will support you in the weariness that you have taken upon yourself." This is a crucial prefiguring of the secret fire. Narya is a sacramental sign. It didn't grant Gandalf the power to conquer, it gave him the power to endure. He was commissioned as the guardian of the hearth, the fire that warms, setting him on a direct collision course with the Balrog, the fire that consumes. For 2 millennia, Gandalf didn't lead armies. He wandered. He became Mithrandir, the Grey Pilgrim. This is the trope of the wandering wizard, but with a deeper philosophical layer. The pedagogy of the humble. Gandalf's power was subsidized. He distributed his strength among the people he met, talking to hobbits, visiting archives, listening to the disenfranchised. Those 2,000 years were his moral crucible. Every time he chose not to use his divine power to rule, he was hardening his spirit for the moment he would have to surrender it all on the bridge. Contrast this with the Balrog. While Gandalf was wandering and learning the names of flowers and the hearts of mortals, the Balrog was hiding in a dark hole, festering in its own hatred. One grew through connection, the other rotted through isolation. One practiced the art of the servant, while the other worshipped the idol of the self. To understand the bridge, we have to understand that Gandalf didn't start as a warrior. He started as a student of sorrow. He was the angel who didn't want the job. The spirit who feared the shadow so much that he was the only one who could be trusted to face it. When we see him on that narrow span in Moria, we aren't seeing a man who finally found his courage. We are seeing a spirit who spent 2,000 years practicing the vocation of the servant. He had already died to his own ego in the gardens of Valinor, but he had accepted the burden of the flesh at the Grey Havens. The bridge isn't just an action scene, it's the final exam of a 2,000-year-old vocation. We move now from the anointing of Gandalf to his role as the Strategic Sentinel of Middle-earth. To understand the bridge, we have to understand that Gandalf was playing a 70-year game of geopolitical chess. He wasn't just reacting to the Balrog, he was methodically cleansing the board of ancient horrors to ensure that when the final war came, the West had a fighting chance. 70 years before the Fellowship, the North was a confluence of catastrophe. You had a sleeping giant in Erebor, the dragon Smaug, and a growing infection in Mirkwood, the necromancer of Dol Guldur. Most saw these as separate problems. The dwarves wanted gold. The elves wanted their woods. But Gandalf had a midnight dread. If Sauron and Smaug were to ever reunite, the end of the West would be nigh. Imagine if Sauron, returning to power, had a calibrated weapon of the First Age at his disposal. Smaug could have turned Rivendell and the Grey Havens into cinders in a single night. Gondor would have been caught in a pincer move from which there was no escape. Gandalf realized he couldn't wait for the storm. He had to prune the garden before winter hit. How does an angel in the body of an old man kill a dragon? He doesn't use a sword. He uses a hobbit. This is the trope of subsidiary, the belief that the most world-shaking events are best handled by the most insignificant people. By choosing Bilbo, Gandalf wasn't just starting a treasure hunt, he was setting a divine trap. He was betting on Providence. He cleared the northern board so that when the Great War finally came, there would be a king of the mountain, in the mountain, and a king in Dale to hold the line. Without the luck of Bilbo, there was no victory for Aragorn. While the dwarves marched on the mountain, Gandalf was fighting a political war in the White Council. Here we see the contrast between the reluctant prophet and the corrupted intellectual. Saruman was the delayer. He wanted to study the enemy, but in reality he was already falling for the will to power. Gandalf, however, understood the trope of infection. You don't study a plague, you cauterize it. In the same year that Smaug died, Gandalf forced the council to strike at Dol Guldur. He drove the shadows south, consolidating the enemy in one place where he could be watched. By the Third Age, 2941, Gandalf had achieved a strategic cleansing. He had made the world safe for a generation. But one wrong note remained in the music. One illegal squatter of the First Age hadn't been accounted for. The bane of the Black Pit of Moria. This is the tragedy that Gandalf carried in his pocket like a piece of lead. We have to talk about the ghost of Khazad-Dûm. In the Third Age, 1980, the dwarves delved too deep. They didn't hit gold, they hit a memory. They hit a survivor of the War of Wrath, who had been hiding in the foundations of the world for 5,000 years. For centuries, Durin's Bane was just a ghost story to the wise. But Gandalf had a Myers intuition. He had walked those halls alone. He knew the temperature of that dark. He knew it wasn't a ghost. It was an echo of the discord. When Balin, the kindly dwarf in the scarlet hood, decided to reclaim Moria in 2989, Gandalf likely felt a cold dread. He wanted to believe a mortal could tame the abyss. He knew that if you move into a haunted house, eventually the owner comes downstairs. Then the letters stopped. From 2994 to 3018, there is nothing but the silence. Think about the narrative weight of that silence. Every time Gandalf looked at the misty mountains, he knew he was looking at a tomb. This is the trope of the impending doom. The characters know just enough to be terrified. When the Fellowship stands before the doors of Durin, Gandalf isn't just trying to remember a password, he's working up the courage to walk into his friend's graveyard. He realizes that his long game has a fatal flaw. He has cleared the dragon and the necromancer, but the relic of hell is still at the table. To finish the cleaning of the world, he has to go to one place where his Istari Mask offers no protection. In Tolkien's cosmology, the world was not built, it was sung. Before time began, Eru Ilúvatar, the creator, gave a great theme to the angelic spirits. They sang in harmony until Melkor, the first Dark Lord, introduced a discord, a loud, repetitive noise that tried to drown out the original theme. But Eru didn't stop the music. He simply introduced a third theme, a theme of grace and hope, and wove the discord into a deeper beauty. This is the will of the world, and it is this music that squeezes the Fellowship toward the doors of Moria. The Fellowship tries to cross the mountain of Caradhras, the Red Horn. In the book, the mountain literally fights them with snow, wind, and stones. Boromir thinks it's the reach of Sauron, but Gandalf senses something older, an ill will in the earth itself. In narrative terms, this is the trope of the Force Path. Caradhras is the bouncer of the world. It is closing every door until there is only one left, Moria. From a tactical perspective, Moria is a disaster, but from a musical perspective, it is a modulation. The song is changing keys. It is moving from the major key of the journey to the minor key of the abyss. Gandalf feels the pull of the deep, not because he wants to go, but because he hears a crescendo building. Think about the Fellowship itself. They are a theme comprised of different voices, the stoicism of the dwarf, the grace of the elf, the frailty of the hobbits. In the great song, Eru's final theme was soft and sweet, but it possessed an unquenchable power. That theme represented the lowly things. Gandalf realizes he is the protector of the theme. He is the shepherd of these small, fragile notes. His leadership through the mines isn't just about finding the right door. It is about keeping the harmony of the Fellowship alive against a spirit that wants to shatter them into silence. This is where we explore the difference between fate and providence. Fate is a dead end, the belief that you are just meat for the machine. Providence is the belief that everything is being used. Gandalf doesn't go into Moria as a victim of bad luck. He goes in as a martyr of the music. He understands that for the theme of the king, for Aragorn to rise, the theme of the wizard must undergo a death sequence. He is listening to the beat of the world's heart. And as they approach the bridge, he knows the secret fire must finally face the Flame of Udûn. When they finally reach the chamber of Marzabul, they find physical evidence of the ghost. They find the tomb of Balin. And here, Gandalf does something profoundly priestly. He picks up the Book of Marzabul. This is a sacramental record. Gandalf reads the words of the expedition aloud, becoming the voice of the dead. We cannot get out. The drum beats. Drums in the deep. As Gandalf reads, he's performing a post-mortem on his own long game. He realizes that the Balrog, the Unmaker, has turned these halls into a silent grave. He is the guardian of the record against the devourer of history. On the bridge, Gandalf isn't just fighting for a ring. He is saying, you silenced my friends, you turned the music into a tomb, but you will not silence the music of the world. As the book is closed, the silence is broken. Not by music, but by the discord. The drums begin again, and this time they have a target. If you've been following us through the gardens of Valinor and the docks of the Grey Havens, you know that Gandalf has spent 2,000 years wearing a mask. He has been the Grey Pilgrim, a wanderer with a pipe and staff, a man who tells stories and plays with fireworks. But in the dark of Moria, the mask doesn't just slip, it shatters. We are in the chamber of Marzabul, the tomb of Balin. The orcs are at the door. The Fellowship is trapped, and Gandalf does something he has avoided for 2 millennia. He uses a word of command. And in that moment, the entire metaphysical landscape of Middle-earth shifts. The grandfather is gone. The exorcist has arrived. In Tolkien's world, sound is a spiritual status report. If the universe was sung into being, then Moria is the space where music has been replaced by the discord. When the Fellowship enters the deep, they aren't just walking into a cave, they are walking into a dark liturgy. The first thing they hear isn't the monster, it's the percussion. Doom, doom. In a traditional liturgy, the beat of the drum signalizes a real presence. In Moria, the drums in the deep are the mechanical, industrial heartbeat of entropy. This is the discord of Melkor made audible. A loud, vain, endlessly repeated clamour that seeks to shatter the harmony of the Fellowship. It is the ticking of a cosmic clock, the sound of an ancient, heavy past catching up to the present. As they move deeper, they encounter a predatory silence. Tolkien describes this as a silence that watches. In theology, evil is often defined as privatio boni, the privation of the good. It is not a thing in itself, but a hole where light and sound should be. This is the sonic hole left in the absence of the creator. In the abyss, your voice no longer has resonance. You are in the void. The Fellowship is small, fragile, and quiet, while the doom of the drums is rhythmic and inevitable. Now look at the shutting spell. To a casual reader, this is just a wizard locking a door. But in Tolkien's philosophy, this is a manifestation of will. Gandalf is clothed in flesh. He's limited by his human battery. But to hold that door, he has to reach back into his nature as a Maya. He has to draw upon the secret fire to bind the physical atoms of the door. And then, something pushes back. Gandalf describes it later as a terrible challenge. He says his word was countered by another word. Imagine two industrial-strength power cables being touched together. The sparks, the ozone, the violent vibration of reality itself. This is a metaphysical ping. When the door is shattered and Gandalf is thrown down the stairs, he isn't just physically shaken, he is unmasked. He realizes that he is no longer dealing with orcs or cave trolls. He realizes there is a peer in the room, another angelic being who now speaks the same primordial language of command. The grey is gone. Gandalf is now the servant, and he's preparing for an eviction. This is the conflict of frequencies. The Balrog's voice is subvocal. It roars, it hisses, and it collects shadow. It is the sound of a furnace, chaos made audible. Gandalf responds with the logos, the word. When he finally reaches the bridge and cries, "I am a servant of the secret fire," he is using the trope of the true name. He is bringing order back to the chaos, using the acoustics of truth to bind a creature made of lies. The climax of this scene isn't just a visual flash, it's a sonic resolution. In music theory, a discord demands a resolution. When Gandalf smites the bridge and the stone snaps asunder, he is breaking the machine. That snap is the sound of sacrificial liberation. It is the only way to stop the song of the Balrog. As they fall, the acoustics shift, and we move from the clashing steel and shouting of the bridge into the muffled hissing hush of the water. The roar of the demon becomes a whimper in the dark. This is the baptism of the abyss. The fire is quenched, signaling that the discord has finally met the resolution of the deep. Now that the silence has been shattered and the door has been broken, we have to talk about exactly what was standing on the other side. We call it the Balrog. The dwarves call it Durin's Bane, but its true name is the Valaraukar, the demon of might. To understand the Balrog, we have to go back to the First Age, to the very beginning of the music. The Balrogs were not monsters created in a lab. Like Gandalf, they were Maya. They were the spirits of fire who existed before the world was made. But where Gandalf was a student of pity, these spirits were seduced by the discord of Melkor. They were drawn to the flame that consumes. In the First Age, they were Morgoth's generals. They weren't hiding in basements. They were flying across the sky like meteors. They destroyed Gondolin. They killed the High Kings of the Elves. They were the war machines of the Elder Days. So, what is a First Age war machine doing in a dwarven basement? This is where the narrative trope of the ancient evil awakened takes on a tragic, almost pathetic quality. At the end of the First Age, the Valar came to Middle-earth to finish Morgoth. It was called the War of Wrath, a conflict so violent that it literally broke the continent. Almost all the Balrogs were destroyed, but one, just one, fled in terror. Imagine a creature that had stood before the throne of God and served the King of Hell, now reduced to a refugee. It crawled into the foundations of the world to hide. It wasn't there to rule. It was traumatized by the light of the West. For 5,000 years it was an illegal squatter of hell, sleeping in the dark until the dwarves, in their greed for mithril, dug too deep and woke the trauma. Tolkien describes the Balrog as shadow in a flame. This is more than a cool visual. This is an ontological description. The shadow. This is the privatio boni, the privation of good. St. Augustine argued that evil is not a thing, but a hole where light should be. The Balrog is wrapped in shadow because it is caving in on itself. It is a black hole of the soul. The flame. This is its original Maya nature, corrupted. It is the Flame of Udûn, a fire that destroys but has no warmth and no light. When Gandalf looks at the Balrog, he's not seeing a monster. He's seeing his own dark mirror. He's seeing what he could have become had he chose power over pity. The peer-to-peer encounter now. The Fellowship is fleeing across the bridge. The Balrog steps out. Notice how the orcs and the trolls fall back. They are secondary evils, the foot soldiers. But this is a primary confrontation. The Balrog looks at Gandalf. It sees the grey hair and the old body, but it smells the West. It feels the secret fire radiating off this old man. Its internal realization is terrifying. They have finally found me. The War of Wrath is not over. And Gandalf looks back. He sees the whip and the ancient malice. He realizes, this is a ghost of my own kind. This is the discord of the music standing in my way. This is the demasking. Gandalf throws off the Grey Pilgrim persona. He stands on that narrow bridge and he doesn't speak to the Fellowship anymore. He speaks to the abyss. He becomes the bailiff of heaven. The bridge is no longer a path. It is a bar of justice. Gandalf is here to serve the Balrog his final eviction notice. He is telling the First Age to finally let go of the Third. Gandalf was never a reactor. He was a shaper of history. He spent centuries pruning the world's garden, killing a dragon here, ousting a necromancer there, all to prepare for the final winter. But there was one weed he couldn't pull. There was the bane in the deep of Moria. When the Fellowship is forced off the mountain, Gandalf knows he's not just taking a shortcut. He's walking into a confrontation he has been dreading for 1,000 years. He's walking into the foundations of stone to settle a debt the world has owed since the beginning of time. The long game is over. The bridge is now the only move. We've reached it. The chapter of the Fellowship of the Ring, the bridge of Khazad-Dûm. If you're standing where the Fellowship is standing, your lungs are burning with the sulphurous air of the deep, and behind you the darkness isn't just a lack of light, it has physical weight. Tolkien describes it as a shadow that has the shape of wings spreading from wall to wall. And then there's the bridge, a slender span of stone without railing or curb. In literature, we call this a liminal space, a thin place where the veil between the physical world and the spiritual world is translucent. By choosing to stand here, Gandalf is turning a tactical choke point into a metaphysical courtroom. He turns, plants his staff, and waits for his cousin from hell. The Logos of the Servant. In the film, we hear a shout. In the book, we witness an exorcism. Gandalf begins with a declaration of his identity. In Catholic theology, a priest acts in persona Christi, not on his own power, but as a vessel. Gandalf does the same. He declares, "I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor." This is a callback to our first segment. The secret fire is the imperishable flame of the Creator. It is the power of being itself. Anor is the sun. Gandalf is essentially saying, I represent reality. I carry the light of the West. He then turns his lens onto he turns the lens on his opponent. He doesn't call it a monster. He uses a title of excommunication. The dark fire will not avail you, Flame of Udûn. Udûn is hell. Gandalf is performing a linguistic binding. He is reminding the Balrog that it is a fallen being, with no right to this world. This is the clash between the sacred fire, which warms, and the profane fire, which destroys. This fight isn't a fight over who is stronger. It is a fight over what is real. To understand this, we look to St. Augustine's concept of privatio boni. The Balrog is shadow because it has lost its substance. It is a spirit caving in on itself. Gandalf, by contrast, is full. He has stayed connected to the Creator. When the Balrog strikes, its false fire fails against the secret fire. Tolkien writes, "The fire in it seemed to die, but the darkness grew." This is ontological warfare. The Balrog is forced to rely entirely on its shadow, on its nothingness, because it cannot coexist with Gandalf. Then comes the climax. The Balrog lunges. Gandalf brings his staff down onto the stone. You cannot pass. In the original manuscript, it was cannot, not shall not. Cannot is a statement of ontological reality. The universe itself will not allow the shadow to cross that line. When Gandalf strikes the bridge, he is performing the fraction, the liturgical breaking of the bread. He is breaking the machine of the world to save the souls of those behind him. He isn't just breaking stone, he is breaking the first age's hold on the third. The Balrog falls, but its whip lashes out, dragging Gandalf to the brink. Here, the grey mask makes its final appearance. He looks at his friends, the sheep he has been shepherding, and gives one final command. Fly, you fools. This is the trope of the scapegoat. Gandalf takes the sin of the First Age into the abyss so the Fellowship can go free. In theology, we call this kenosis, a self-emptying. He gives up his life, his mission, and his staff. He falls into the darkness, not as a loser, but as a high priest finishing a sacrifice. He descends into hell so that the Eucatastrophe, the sudden joyous turn, can eventually happen. The bridge is gone. The wizard is gone. The shadow is gone. The Fellowship is left in a silence louder than the drums. But this ontological clash is over. The illegal squatter has been dragged back to the foundations of stone by the bailiff of heaven. We often think the fight ended on the bridge, but as we'll see, the bridge was just the opening bell. The real war is about to take place in the lowest dungeon, where Gandalf will be burned clean of the grey to become the white. We left off at the breaking of the bridge. The Fellowship is fleeing into the light of Lothlorien, mourning a lost leader. But for Gandalf, the story hasn't ended. It has simply moved to a different dimension. In the book, we don't see what happens until much later, when Gandalf the White recounts it in fragments of falling, of ice-cold water, of a clutch that burned and then froze. This is the unwritten scene. This is the harrowing. When Gandalf falls with the Balrog, he is reenacting the harrowing of hell. In the Christian creed, this is the descent to the abyss, to confront death in its own territory. As they fall, Gandalf says, "Long I fell, and he fell with me. His fire was about me, I was burned." This is purgatorial fire. To become the white, Gandalf must first be burned clean of the grey. He's literally taking the heat for Middle-earth, suffering alongside the very evil he is trying to purge. They hit the bottom, the foundations of stone. This is what St. Augustine called the outer dark. It is the place furthest from the light of the Creator, a realm of pure non-being, gnawed at by nameless things. Notice what happens to the Balrog when they hit the water. His fire was quenched. He was now a thing of slime, stronger than a strangling snake. This is a metaphysical stripping. The Balrog's fire, his ego, his false light is gone. He is now reduced to his raw, ugly essence. And Gandalf too is stripped. No staff, no fireworks, no hobbits to protect. Just two cousins of the spiritual realm fighting in the wet dark where time has no meaning. This is the end of ego. Gandalf has to defeat the Balrog, not as a wizard, but as a pure, naked will. Then begins the climb, the endless stair. In Catholic tradition, this mirrors the dark night of the soul, a grueling vertical pilgrimage from the lowest dungeon to the highest peak. The battle lasts for days. There is no audience, no one is cheering, no one even knows he's alive. This is the hidden sacrifice, the work of a saint doing the hardest thing imaginable in total anonymity. Gandalf is leading the evil out of the world, step by agonizing step, chasing the shadow back up into the sun. They burst onto the peak of Celebdil, into the blinding snow. From below, the world sees a storm of fire and lightning. They think it's weather, but it's actually an apocalypse. The Balrog flares up for one last desperate burst of the Flame of Udûn, and Gandalf counters with the light of Anor. On this mountain, Gandalf finally unveils his power. He throws down his enemy, and the mountainside is broken. But the victory is total. Gandalf, having spent every spark of his Maya energy, finally lets go. The darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time. This is the most Catholic thing that Tolkien ever wrote. Gandalf did not reincarnate himself, and the angels, the Valar, did not have the authority to bring him back. This is the primary miracle. Tolkien explicitly stated in his letters that Eru Ilúvatar, the god of Middle-earth, stepped into the story. God reaches into the abyss. He picks up his broken servant, and he says, "Well done, but you're not finished yet." Gandalf is sent back as the White. In theological terms, this is the glorified body. In narrative terms, he is now the master of two worlds. He has seen the outer dark, and he has seen the light of God. He now possesses an authority that Saruman, who stayed in his tower, could never understand. The weight of the return. The abyss in the ascent wasn't just about killing a monster. It was about Gandalf becoming a perfect instrument of grace. He had to die to himself to become the leader Middle-earth required. So when we see the White Wizard return later, remember the nameless things at the bottom of the world. Remember that the light we see him in was earned in the deepest, most unwritten dark. The wizard is back, and the shadow has finally, truly met its match. We've followed the wizard into the dark. We've watched him fall. We've traced his steps up the endless stair, and we've witnessed the thunder on the peak. And then Tolkien gives us a sentence that stops the heart. Darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time. and I wandered far on roads that I will not tell. This is the unwritten scene. This is the gap in the map where the story of Middle-earth stops being a legend and starts being a revelation. We have to ask, why did the creator of the universe, the one who usually lets the world spin on its own, reach down and touch this specific soul on this specific mountain? To answer that, we need to look back to the third theme of the Enu Lindale. In the beginning, Eru Ilúvatar began a theme that was soft and sweet, but deep and wide. This was the theme of providence. By the end of the Third Age, hope was a dying resource. Middle-earth wasn't just losing a war of swords. It was losing a war of the spirit. Sauron's greatest weapon was despair. If Gandalf, the one light keeping the West together, died and stayed dead, the third theme would have been silenced. Eru intervened to send a signal. The shadow is a temporary discord. My music is the final word. Defining the Eucatastrophe, Tolkien coined the word to describe the sudden joyous turn in a story, a miracle that comes from outside the narrative's logic. In Catholic theology, the resurrection of Christ is the great Eucatastrophe of history. When Gandalf falls, that is the catastrophe. When he dies, that is the total failure of the mission. But then, the turn. This isn't luck or a respawn. This is grace. This is the moment where the author of the story reaches into the book and turns the page himself. Tolkien's letters tell us something shocking. The Valar, the angelic powers of the West, could not bring Gandalf back. They were bound by the rules of the world. When Gandalf died, he was off the clock. In that straying out of thought and time, Gandalf stands before the Creator. The reluctant prophet who spent 2,000 years wandering the cold roads is finally home. He has earned his rest. But Eru doesn't just resurrect him, he amplifies him. This is the primary miracle. Gandalf is now given new management. He is no longer the emissary of the angels. He is now the direct agent of God. Usually in fantasy, a hero reborn is just version 2.0, but Gandalf the White is fundamentally different. Gandalf the Grey was the pilgrim, a counselor who worked through hints and fireworks. Gandalf the White is the revealed, a commandant. This mirrors the difference between the suffering servant and the risen Lord. He is found naked on the peak because he is a new man. He is the white because the white is the prism that contains all colours. He has integrated the lessons of the shadow and the flame. He has seen the outer dark and the light of God, making him the master of two worlds. We've travelled from the council chambers of Valinor to the lightless roots of the world. We have seen the spirit of fire descend on the abyss and emerge, not just alive, but transfigured. As we close this deep dive into the bridge of Khazad-Dûm, the Grey Pilgrim is gone. The White Rider has arrived. But now we have to look at the theological weight of this transformation. This moment is the key that unlocks the victory of the Third Age. Beginning in our first segment, we talked about Olorin's fear, his reluctance to face Sauron. But look at Gandalf the White. The fear is gone. In Catholic theology, the saints are those whose wills have become perfectly aligned with the Creator's. Gandalf the White is no longer seeking his way. He is the way. He has integrated the lessons of the shadow and the flame. He now moves through Middle-earth with what we call the authority of the void. He has seen the end of all things, and therefore he can no longer be intimidated by the shadow of a fallen Maya like Sauron. Notice how his methodology shifts. Gandalf the Grey spent 2,000 years nudging, whispering in ears, setting off fireworks and giving advice. He was a counselor. But Gandalf the White, he's a force of nature. He no longer asks for entry into the halls of power, he commands it, the church militant in action. The bridge was the moment the West stopped retreating and started advancing. Sauron thinks he's playing a game of chess against mortal kings. He doesn't realize he is now playing against a divine proxy. The spiritual victory was won the moment Gandalf's feet touched the grass of Middle-earth. There is one final, beautiful detail. Even in his peak power, Gandalf remains part of the communion of spirits. He doesn't resurrect himself, and he doesn't clothe himself. He relies on Gwaihir the Windlord to carry him, the earth, the peak of Celebdil to hold him, and the elves, Galadriel's loom, to clothe him. This is the sacramental nature of reality. God works through physical things. Gandalf's restoration wasn't just magic. It was an act of restoration. He was sent back because he still had love to give the world, and the world in turn helped him to stand back up. If the bridge was the Good Friday of the story, the sacrifice, the darkness, the cry of "Fly, you fools," then the return of the White Wizard is the Easter Sunday. It is the final proof that the music of the Ainur is stronger than the discord of Melkor. It proves that the pity, the quality that led Gandalf to the bridge to save his friends, is the ultimate strategic weapon. Gandalf didn't win because he was stronger than the Balrog. He won because he was fathoms deeper. He was willing to be emptied, and therefore he was the only one the Creator could truly fill. We could talk for hours about what happens next. The exorcism of Theoden, the stand against the Witch King, the final march to the Black Gate, but those stories are for another day. For today, our journey ends here, on the edges of Lothlorien, watching a figure in white emerge from the trees. The shadow and flame are gone. The hidden fire has returned. And for the first time in an age, the third theme of the great song is playing at full volume. As Tolkien once wrote, "The birth, death, and resurrection of Christ is the Eucatastrophe of man's history. On the bridge of Khazad-Dûm, he gave us the Eucatastrophe of Middle-earth." Thank you so much for joining me on this journey and exploration into the Bridge of Khazad-Dûm and why that part of the story was so important. Thank you for journeying with me and experiencing this deep dive. Coming up in our next episode, we will be exploring Vegeta, the Prince of all Saiyans, and exploring perhaps one of storytelling's greatest redemption arcs, and Toriyama's constant struggles with a character he clearly despised, but the fans seem to love. So, without further ado, thank you so much for joining me at the Dragon's Lair. My name is Cavill. I'm signing off. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're on YouTube, feel free to throw a like and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, look forward to the next episode. Stay shiny, everyone. Thank you for coming.